I've spent 17 years catching people who sign other people's names for a living. So when a letter from Lakeshore Regional Credit Union landed in my mailbox on a Tuesday in September, thanking me for serving as guarantor on a commercial refinance I had never heard of, I didn't panic. I did what I do at work. I took it to the kitchen window, held the page up to the light, and studied the signature at the bottom. Carly A. Voss. The loops were close. Whoever did it had practiced. But my real C starts with a small hook. A habit from a third-grade teacher who made me trace letters until my hand cramped, and this C was smooth. Clean, confident in a way my own hand has never been. I stood at my kitchen window in Milwaukee for a long time, holding a piece of paper that said I had promised to cover a debt against the Voss Orchard Inn in Door County. Application dated March 2024. I hadn't spoken to my family in 4 years. My name is Carly Voss. I'm 41 years old, and I investigate insurance fraud for a living, staged accidents. Doctored invoices, the occasional life insurance claim on someone who turns out to be alive and well in Florida. People lie to me professionally. I'm rarely surprised anymore, but there is a specific feeling when the forged name is yours. It's not anger, not at first. It's a kind of vertigo. Someone sat at a table, somewhere, and practiced being me until they got good enough at it to borrow money with my hand. To understand why I didn't immediately call the police, you have to understand the ledger. Not a real one, although, believe me, I could build it, but the one I've carried in my head since I was 15. My family owns a small inn on the Door County Peninsula, 11 rooms and a cherry orchard sloping down toward the water. My mother, Elaine, ran it the way a conductor runs an orchestra, and she was magnificent at the parts people could see. Fresh flowers in every room, handwritten welcome cards. What guests never saw was the office in the back, where the unpaid invoices went into a drawer she called later. I was the one who found the drawer, 15 years old, looking for stamps. By 16 I was doing the books. By 17 I was handing over my summer paychecks from the Fishboil restaurant in Ephraim because the propane supplier had stopped delivering on credit. My mother had a way of asking that never sounded like asking. She'd squeeze my shoulder and say I was the one she never had to worry about. For most of my life, I mistook that sentence for love. It took me until my 30s to hear what it actually was. A job assignment. My younger brother, Shane, was the one she worried about, which meant he was the one she protected. Shane got the charm and the debts. I got the spreadsheets. And still, I want to be honest about this, I didn't mind for a long time. I loved that inn. I pruned those cherry rows as a kid. When the 2018 season nearly sank us, I wired $38,000 of my own savings without being asked twice, because my mother sat me down under the big maple behind the kitchen and told me the inn would be part mine someday. She said it like a vow. She even patted the deed folder she'd brought out to the picnic table, as if the paperwork were already halfway done. In the spring of 2021, I found out the deed had been quietly redone. Russell and Elaine Voss, and Shane Voss. My father, my mother, my brother. 3 names, not 4. I found out by accident, the way you find out most true things about a family. A title search I ran on my lunch break for an unrelated reason, just to check a property line question my father had mentioned. I stared at that screen for 10 minutes. Then I called my mother, and she said the thing I still hear sometimes when I can't sleep. She said, "Sweetheart, Shane needs the stability. You've never needed anything." I didn't scream. I'm not a screamer. I said okay, and I hung up, and I simply stopped. Stopped calling, stopped wiring, stopped absorbing. Nobody chased me. That was the part that settled it. 4 years, and the only mail I got from Door County came from my grandmother Ruth, 87 now, who slipped me honest letters in shaky cursive. The orchard's losing trees. Your father repeats himself at dinner. Your brother looks tired in a way I don't like. Ruth never asked me for a dime. She just refused to pretend I didn't exist. Those letters were the only thread I kept. So when I stood at my kitchen window holding a guarantee I never signed, on a loan against an inn I'd been erased from, the vertigo hardened into something colder and more useful. I photographed the letter. I logged the date. I pulled my own signature exemplars from old closing documents and laid them side by side on the counter like any other case file, because that's what this was now. A case file with my maiden memories in it. I was still standing there when my phone buzzed against the counter. A text, from a number I hadn't seen light up my screen in 4 years. My mother, and behind it, an emailed image, thick cream cardstock, embossed lettering, cherry blossoms along the border. You are warmly invited to celebrate the 40th wedding anniversary and vow renewal of Russell and Elaine Voss. A family weekend at Birchwater Lodge, Door County. October 17th through 19th. 4 years of silence. 6 months after someone signed my name. And now, suddenly, they wanted me home. I didn't reply to the text that night. I let it sit on my screen the way you let a suspicious claim sit in your inbox, untouched, but very much being examined. 2 days later, a heavier version arrived by mail. The real invitation, cream cardstock thick enough to stand on its own, cherry blossoms pressed into the border, and folded inside it, a printed program for the whole weekend. Friday welcome dinner, Saturday orchard walk, golden hour vow renewal on the dock, celebration dinner at 8. Sunday farewell brunch, and at the bottom of the program, in small elegant italics, one line that stopped my breath halfway down. This weekend is hosted with gratitude by our daughter, Carly. Hosted, present tense, printed, already decided. I hadn't spoken to any of them in 4 years, and somewhere a designer had been paid to typeset my generosity. I brought both documents to work the next morning, not officially, just in my bag, and laid them on the break room table in front of Marcus. Marcus has sat 6 feet from me for 9 years. He investigates arson claims, mostly, which means he's spent a decade around people who burn things down and then act surprised at the smoke. He read the lender letter first, then the program. He tapped the italic line with one finger. You see what this is, right? They're not inviting you, they're announcing you. Nobody prints your name under hosted by, and then asks how you feel about it. He slid the papers back. If a claimant did this, you'd have flagged the file an hour ago. You'd have a case number by now. He was right, and the reason it stung is that I already knew it. When it's a stranger's file, I'm ice. When it's my mother's handwriting on the envelope, some 15-year-old part of me still checks whether I did something to deserve it. So I did the thing I know how to do. I stopped feeling and started documenting. The program listed the venue, Birchwater Lodge, a timber and glass event property on the quiet side of the peninsula, the kind of place that hosts weddings for people who use autumn as an adjective. I called the main line on my lunch break and asked for whoever managed private events. I got a woman named Priya Nair, measured voice, careful diction, the tone of someone who has diffused 100 family situations without ever raising her volume. I identified myself, full name, spelled out. There was a pause on her end, the kind of pause I recognize, because I make the same one when a name on my screen suddenly matches a name on a phone call. Ms. Voss. Yes, you're on the file. Which file? The Voss anniversary event, October 17th through 19th. Another pause, more careful now. You're listed as the financial guarantor on the event contract. The signed agreement has the remaining balance due on site the final evening. Saturday, 8 p.m. Presented at the celebration dinner per the client's instructions. Per the client's instructions, someone had specifically requested that the bill be walked out during dinner. Scheduled it, like a course. I kept my voice flat, the way I do on recorded lines. Priya, I need to tell you something, and I'd like it noted on the account. I have never seen that contract. I never signed it. I only learned my name was attached to any of this 2 days ago. Through a lender letter about a separate loan. She didn't gasp. Professionals don't. She said, I understand, in the tone of someone writing while speaking, and then she said the sentence that mattered. You're entitled to a copy of any agreement bearing your signature. If you email me a formal request with ID, I'll send the executed contract and the intake paperwork today. The documents arrived at 4:41 that afternoon. I printed them at home, sat at my kitchen table, and went through them with the same red pen I use on strangers' claims, the pen my team jokes about. Because once it comes out, somebody's story is over. Page 4, there it was again, Carly A. Voss, guarantor. The same smooth, hookless same slight rightward lean my hand has never had. I circled it twice and wrote in the margin the same 3 words I've written on 100 fraud files, not the insured. Except this time I crossed it out and wrote what it actually was. Not me. Then I checked the intake date on the lodge contract, and I felt the floor of the whole thing drop another level. The event had been booked, and my guarantee executed in April. The invitation, the warm, embossed, cherry blossom invitation begging me to come home, hadn't gone out until September. I called Priya back with one last question, and she answered it quietly, like she already understood what she was confirming. The guarantor paperwork was submitted with the original booking, Ms. Voss. 6 months before your invitation was ever printed. 6 months. They hadn't invited me and then hoped I'd help. They'd signed me first, and then sent the invitation to collect. 6 months. I sat with that number for a full evening, and then I stopped sitting and started building. Here's something most people don't know about forgery cases. The hard part is almost never proving the signature is fake. The hard part is proving it fast enough to matter. A guarantee sits in a lender's file like a live wire, and every day you don't formally dispute it, your silence starts to look like consent. I had a contractual balance coming due at 8 p.m. on a Saturday in October, attached to a name I never gave anyone permission to use. The clock wasn't a metaphor, it was on the paperwork, so I worked it like a case, because it was one. I sent Lakeshore Regional a written dispute and a records request. What came back was the full refinance file on the Voss Orchard Inn application dated March 2024, a second mortgage position, my signature, appearing twice, plus a notarization page that made my stomach drop for professional reasons. The notary's stamp was real. The log entry said I'd appeared in person, in Sturgeon Bay, on a Tuesday I could prove I'd spent in a claims deposition 200 miles away in Milwaukee. Somebody hadn't just faked my hand. Somebody had faked my presence. I pulled my exemplars, a decade of real signatures from closings, notarized forms, my own HR file, and did the comparison the way I do it for a stranger. Then paid an independent forensic document examiner to do it again so no one could ever say the fraud investigator graded her own homework. Her report came back with the phrase I expected, significant indications the questioned signatures were not executed by the writer of the exemplars. Then I drove to a notary who didn't know me, raised my right hand, and swore out an affidavit of forgery. 4 pages, clinical. It stated that I never signed the refinance, never signed the lodge guarantee, never appeared before any notary in Sturgeon Bay, and that I reserved the right to request criminal referral. The lender's fraud department accepted it on one condition I asked for myself. They would hold it in queue, unfiled, until I gave the word or until the following Monday, whichever came first. Marcus thought I'd lost my mind. You've got them, why are you sitting on it? I didn't have a clean answer for him. The honest one was this: the moment that affidavit went active, someone in my family was exposed to a felony. And even after everything, the deed, the 4 years, my own name stolen out from under me, my hand paused over that button. I told myself I was being thorough. What I was actually doing was giving them one last chance to be people I didn't have to do this to. That Saturday, I drove up to Door County early, 3 weeks before the anniversary weekend, and I didn't tell my parents. I went to see my grandmother. Ruth lives in the small caretaker cottage behind the inn, the one with the wood stove she refuses to give up. She's 87 and she opened the door like I'd been there the day before. No gasp, no tears, no speech. She said, "I'll put coffee on." And that was the whole reunion, and it was perfect. We walked the orchard while the coffee brewed. That hurt more than I expected. The rows I pruned every spring of my childhood were shaggy and gapped, whole trees gone gray and brittle, windfall apples from the neighbor's line rotting in the grass because nobody rakes anymore. An inn is a story you have to keep telling every single day, and you could see, row by row, exactly when they'd stop telling it. Over coffee, Ruth told me what her letters had only hinted at. The inn was behind on everything: the bank, the county, the fuel supplier. She'd heard the word foreclosure through the kitchen wall, spoken in her daughter-in-law's lowest voice, the one Elaine only uses for true things. "They think I'm deaf," Ruth said. "I'm not deaf, I'm just quiet, those are different." And then she said the thing I'd driven 3 hours to hear and dreaded hearing. "Your brother's been signing things, Carly. Papers coming to the house in envelopes he takes to his truck to open. He looks terrible. He looks like your grandfather looked in '86, and that year nearly killed him." She stirred her coffee. "I don't know what he signed, but whatever it is, he can't carry it. You can see it hanging off him." She didn't know it was my name he'd signed. I didn't tell her. She's 87, and that weight belonged to me, not her. Driving home along the water, I settled the terms with myself, and I want to be honest that they were terms, because I'm my mother's daughter in at least that one way. I don't do anything without a structure. The affidavit would stay in escrow through the weekend. I would go to the anniversary, and I would give them one clean opening, a whole weekend of openings, to say one honest sentence. Any of them: "We're in trouble, we used your name, we're sorry, help us." One honest sentence and I'd tear up the timeline and sit down with them like family. No honest sentence, and Monday morning the file would speak in my place. 3 weeks later, on a gray Friday in mid-October, I drove north again with a bag in the trunk and a sealed folder on the passenger seat. I didn't rehearse a confrontation. I didn't practice a speech in the windshield reflection. Everything I might need to say was already written, sworn, and waiting, riding beside me the whole quiet way up the shoreline, patient as a loaded question. Saturday morning arrived gray and windless, the lake flat as hammered tin, and my mother found me at breakfast with a job. She always leads with a job. Sweetheart, run over to the inn with me before the orchard walk? I want to bring the wedding album and Grandma Ruth's cake topper for tonight. You remember where everything is. A hand on my shoulder. That squeeze. 41 years old and my body still responded to it like a summons. So I drove her the 15 minutes to the inn, and while she went upstairs hunting for the album, she asked me to grab her canvas tote from the office, the blue one. It has the topper wrapped in tissue. The office, the room where I found the unpaid invoice drawer when I was 15. It smelled exactly the same, dust and cold coffee and old carbon paper. The blue tote was on the desk chair. The tissue-wrapped cake topper was right on top. Under it was a manila folder, unlabeled, and I want to be able to tell you I hesitated. I didn't. 17 years of training doesn't switch off because the file cabinet belongs to your mother. The first page stopped my breathing. My signature, my name, Carly A. Voss, written maybe 40 times, top to bottom, in neat descending rows like a child's penmanship drill. The early attempts were wrong. Hesitant, the C2 round. By the bottom of the page they were fluent, practiced, loved into shape, and they were not in Shane's handwriting. I grew up on notes from both of them, permission slips, grocery lists, birthday cards. Shane writes like he's fleeing the page. This was careful, controlled, the pen pressure even, the baseline straight as a hymnline. This was my mother's hand. Page 2 was worse, because page 2 was a checklist. Her looping blue ink, her habit of numbering everything. The same hand that wrote pick up dry cleaning my entire childhood. Friday, arrival, welcome toast, gratitude, language. Saturday, orchard walk, vows at 5, dinner at 8. And the final line, underlined twice. C. Confirms guarantee, witnesses present. I stood in that office and understood the whole machine at once. Shane hadn't dreamed this up in a panic. He'd been handed a pen. The forged application, the doctored notarization, the invitation timed 6 months after the signature. The program that printed my gratitude before anyone asked for it, the balance scheduled to arrive at dinner like dessert, all of it authored by the woman upstairs humming while she looked for her wedding album. The weekend wasn't a reconciliation with a trap inside it. The weekend was the trap, and the reconciliation was the wrapping paper. I photographed both pages where they lay. I put the folder back under the tissue. I carried the tote out to the car and told my mother the topper was lovely. And she smiled at me with her whole face, and I smiled back, and neither smile was real, and only one of us knew that both weren't. The vows happened at 5, golden hour, the dock strung with white ribbon that snapped in the lake wind. My father repeated his lines slowly, half a beat behind, glancing at my mother for cues the way he'd been glancing at her all weekend. 40 years, the officiant said. The relatives dabbed their eyes. I stood where the program placed me and watched my mother promise honesty till death in front of 30 witnesses she had assembled for a different purpose entirely. Dinner was at 8, candles down the long table, the anniversary cake on its own stand, Ruth seated at my right where she'd planted herself without asking anyone. At 8:04, exactly per the contract, Priya entered with a slim leather folder, and I watched my mother track her across the room with the calm of a director watching her cue arrive on time. Priya set the folder down. The remaining event balance, as arranged. My mother rose, glass in hand, warm as June. Everyone, before dessert. I want to thank the person who made this entire weekend possible. She turned to me, eyes shining, and 30 faces turned with her. Carly, honey, your father and I are so grateful. This is what family looks like. There it was, the moment on the checklist. Witnesses present. I didn't stand. I didn't raise my voice. I took the folder Priya had placed within my reach, opened it, and looked at the signature line where my name was already printed, waiting only to be made true. I need to say something, and I'm going to say it once, calmly. The room quieted at my tone, flat, procedural, the voice I use on recorded calls. I never signed this contract. I never signed the refinance on the inn. I never stood in front of a notary in Sturgeon Bay on March 12th of last year. I was in a deposition in Milwaukee, and the transcript proves it. The signatures on those documents are forgeries of my name. Nobody moved. My mother's smile held, but it held the way ice holds in late March. 3 weeks ago I swore a notarized affidavit of forgery. A forensic document examiner has already confirmed the signatures aren't mine. The lender's fraud unit is holding my affidavit in escrow. It activates Monday morning, Unless the people who did this correct the record themselves, tonight, in writing. I set my phone on the tablecloth, screen up, showing a photograph of a page of my own name written 40 times in someone else's hand. I came here hoping I wouldn't need it. I wanted one honest sentence from this family. The weekend's almost over. I'm still waiting. The sound that broke the silence wasn't my mother. It was Shane. He stood up so fast his chair went over backward, and everything he'd been carrying since Friday came out of him at once, cracked and ugly and true. I signed it. Carly, I signed your name. Mom said it was temporary. She said you'd agree once you came home. She said we'd make it real this weekend and no one would ever. His voice split. I sat at the kitchen table and she slid the practice sheets across to me and I copied them until it looked right. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. I couldn't sleep. I haven't slept since April. Every eye in the room went to my mother. She was still standing, still holding her glass, and she reached for the room the way she'd reached for it her whole life. Shane is exhausted. He's confused. Carly always wanted to help the inn. This was only ever a formality. Elaine, one word, from the end of the table. My father. He was gripping the tablecloth with both hands, and his face, his poor, foggy, trailing face, was doing something I'd never seen. Catching up all at once. What did you do? What is she talking about? What did you sign my son's hands to? And I understood, watching him, that he genuinely hadn't known. Whatever he'd half noticed and let slide, he had not known this. My mother looked at him, then at Shane, then at 30 witnesses she had personally invited, and I watched the exact moment she ran out of audience. Beside me, Ruth pushed back her chair and stood, 87 years old, slow and deliberate, and moved to stand at my shoulder with her hand on my arm. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. In our family, where you stand has always been the whole language. I closed the folder and set it gently beside the untouched cake. Here are the terms, a full written statement, what was signed, by whom, at whose direction, delivered to the lender by Monday, 9 a.m. A restitution plan within 30 days. Do that, and my affidavit stays what it is now, a correction, not a criminal referral. I looked at my mother last. You wanted witnesses. Mom, you got them. What they witnessed is up to you. The candles burned, nobody touched their glass, and for the first time in my life, the silence at a Voss family table was not mine to fill. I drove back to Milwaukee Sunday morning without saying goodbye to anyone except Ruth. Monday at 8:52 a.m., 8 minutes before my deadline, the lender's fraud unit called me. A written statement had arrived overnight by email, signed by Shane, countersigned, to my genuine surprise, by my mother. It laid out the whole mechanism, who held the pen, who supplied the practice sheets, who arranged the notarization. The refinance guarantee was voided that afternoon. My affidavit stayed exactly what I designed it to be, a correction, held in reserve, its criminal referral box unchecked. I want to tell you the truth about that moment, because it wasn't triumph. I sat at my desk and watched a caseworker in another city delete my name from a liability field, one line disappearing from one screen. And I had to close my office door for a few minutes. 17 years of doing this for strangers, and I'd never once understood what that single keystroke feels like from the other side. Without a guarantor, the refinance collapsed, and without the refinance, the inn had no road left. It went on the market in November and sold in early spring to a couple from Madison who planned to run it as a wedding venue. The closing covered the bank, the county, and most of the vendors. In May, Ruth mailed me a photograph she'd taken from the road. The surviving cherry rose in full white bloom for the new owners, indifferent as weather to everything our family had done to keep them. Shane met his 30-day deadline with 4 days to spare. His restitution plan wasn't dramatic. That's how I knew it was real. A payment schedule for the fees and costs his forgery had triggered, enrollment in a debt counseling program in Green Bay, and a written authorization letting the lender verify his compliance directly, so I would never have to be his auditor. He drives for a regional freight company now. He sends the payment confirmation on the 1st of each month, and in December he added one line beneath the receipt, "I sleep now." I didn't deserve to for a while. I wrote back 2 words, "Keep going," and that is the entire correspondence, and somehow it's the most honest relationship he and I have ever had. My mother sent one letter in January. 3 handwritten pages in that careful, even hand I now know can become anyone's. I read it once, standing at the same kitchen window where this whole thing began. It was a masterwork of her particular grammar, everything she'd been through, everything she'd built, everything she'd only ever wanted for this family. The word sorry appeared nowhere in 3 pages. The word "in" appeared 11 times. I didn't answer it. I put it in the file with the practice sheets and the affidavit, because that's where it belonged, not hidden, not burned, just documented. She still hosts holidays, I'm told, in the smaller house they rent in Sturgeon Bay. The relatives who watched that toast come apart attend less often, and stay less long. She hasn't lost her voice. She's lost her audience, and for a woman like my mother, I honestly don't know which is worse. My father called me in February. It was a short call, and he was having a clear day, and he used it on me. Carly, I didn't know. That's not an excuse. I should have known, and I made myself a man it was easy to hide things from. I'm sorry. 14 seconds, maybe. One honest sentence, arriving 4 months late and 40 years late and exactly on time. I'd spent an entire October weekend waiting for those words from anyone at that table. When they finally came, they came from the person I'd least held responsible, and they landed heavier than any reconciliation dinner ever could have. I thanked him. We talk sometimes now, briefly, on his clear days. It isn't much, it's just real, which makes it more than most of what came before. Ruth took her share from the inn's sale and rented a small blue house near the water in Ephraim, close enough to hear the harbor. I drive up one Saturday a month. We drink coffee on her porch and she tells me stories about my grandfather and the bad year of '86, and neither of us performs anything for anyone. Last visit, she nodded at the file box I still keep in my trunk, habit, I suppose, and said, "You can put that in a closet now, you know." She's right, I'm working on it. People ask me, when pieces of this story come out, whether I regret not pressing charges. I don't. The terms did what a courtroom couldn't, they made the truth a requirement instead of a verdict. Shane is paying for what his hands did. My mother is living inside the story she wrote, minus the readers. And I'm not carrying any of it. Here's the accounting, since accounting is what I do. I spent 26 years as this family's guarantor. Before I ever saw the word printed on a fraudulent form, I was already living it. Every shortfall, every quiet emergency, every version of events that needed my name underneath it to stand up. They only ever put on paper what I had always been. The first signature I ever refused to give was the one they manufactured without me. And refusing it, formally, in writing, notarized, witnessed, turned out to be the only document I ever signed that was entirely mine. My name is on it 41 years late. It holds.